Hello there, people of the internet. Welcome back to my little table of sunshine and rainbows we got going on here. You'll have to forgive my voice, I am coming over a cold, so I do apologize for that. That being said, I think it sounds a little deeper and a little sexier than normal. So this right here is a cartridge that causes a lot of controversy in the firearms community, mostly between people who have actually used it and people who have only basically said what they have seen other people say or what they have seen on paper, etc., etc. This is M855 green tip. I got multiple brands here, that's why we got multiple different colors of green tip. This is from just a miscellaneous bag that I have laying around for range purposes. So, this right here is 62 grain projectiles, and from a full-length M16 style barrel, they should be traveling at around 3,000 feet per second. Issue is, most of your rifles, your AR platform rifles nowadays, are not going to be that full-length M16 style barrel. They're going to be a 16-inch barrel or potentially even shorter. So in the shorter barrels that most people end up using nowadays, these 62 grain projectiles tend to travel, I've seen anywhere, depending on like brand, manufacturer, etc., etc. I've seen them go anywhere from 2,900 feet per second to 2,700 feet per second. Most of them tend to lean on that 2,700 feet per second mark, but I have seen one or two examples that do go 2,900. So I guess do your research, figure out what brand it is that you feel like going with. If you're going with just the standard military surplus stuff, which is what most people end up going with anyway, that stuff is the stuff that tends to travel around 2,700 feet per second from that shorter barrel. Whenever this stuff was designed, it was designed with the intention of being used in a longer barrel. So it was created, adopted, and utilized by military forces, and then the military went to the M4 carbine with a 14.5-inch barrel, so that is a shorter barrel that they are trying to use this stuff with, and that just kind of creates ice pick wounds. You can ask anybody who's actually utilized this stuff that it is not all that effective. So I also hear a lot of people tell me that since it is a steel core green tip, it is good at piercing body armor. If you can find me a decent video where this out pierces M193 from a full-length barrel, I will eat the hat that I'm wearing. Now, steel core is going to have its benefits, like if you're trying to go through concrete or something like that, that little bit extra weight and that steel that's going to hold the bullet together a little bit more, that's going to be a little bit more effective than, say, just a straight lead core round. These right here are not a straight steel core round, they just have a little bit of a penetrator inside of them. With that penetrator inside of them, manufacturing of these bullets is not all that great, especially if we're talking about just the standard military surplus stuff. That little steel penetrator inside of them might be a little higher or a little lower or a little left or right in comparison to the exact center of that bullet. And so as a result of that, as it goes down range, it might favor drifting one way or the other. These rounds are notorious for not being all that accurate. So now that we've gone through the negative aspects of these rounds, I'm going to go ahead and talk about some of the positives. The big, main, absolute positive behind these rounds is how absolutely available they are. They are a NATO standard and can be found literally everywhere. If you walk into basically any gun store, you're going to be able to find green tip rounds. So if you have a full-length barrel, these rounds can actually be quite formidable, especially if we're talking about ranges that most distances are going to be taking place in. They might not be that accurate. The accuracy that I've gotten from these, like the absolute best accuracy I've gotten from these, is about 3 MOA. But that being said, 3 to 5 MOA is about the standard of accuracy for a military rifle anyway. And that 3 to 5 MOA accuracy is going to be accurate enough to be able to make hits on target at the distances that most things are going to be taking place at. If we are considering things like this in an SHTF situation, we got a steel core, so it would be better at holding itself together whenever it's trying to punch through harder objects in comparison to lead rounds. If you have a full-length barrel, you get all the benefits of the round as well. 62 grains, that's a little bit heavier projectile in comparison to the 55 grain that most people are going to be using, and it's accurate enough to be able to engage at distances that most people are going to have to engage at. Typically, if you're engaging in some sort of SHTF situation, odds are 9 times out of 10 you're going to be engaging within shouting distance, and that is well within the 300-yard mark, so yeah, you shouldn't have any problems with these right here. There is absolutely better 223 5.56 out there on the market. Personally, I lean more towards the 77 grain projectiles. As a matter of fact, I got myself a couple of VMAX rounds, and those work extremely well on soft targets. It is just designed to expand and dump all of its energy on target in comparison to something like this right here, especially from a shorter barrel, which, like I said, is just going to leave a little ice pick wound through something. I would honestly rather be hit by one of these than one of those 77 grain VMAX rounds, especially if we're talking from a shorter barrel. Even if you're rocking a standard 16-inch AR platform, and you got these right here that go through that 16-inch platform, within that 300-yard mark, which is well within what most engagements would be taking place at, even in an SHTF situation, 9 times out of 10, these are absolutely going to be good enough. Now, if you got yourself an AR pistol or something that is significantly shorter than that 16-inch barrel, that's where you might want to start steering away from these green tip rounds. They're not nearly as effective as they are supposed to be out of shorter length barrels. So whether or not you want to stockpile these for any kind of SHTF situation, yes, they are absolutely viable for it. They are heavy, steel core, they punch through barriers better than a lead core round would. They might not punch through body armor better than a lead core round would, but from a long barrel like this right here, you get yourself decent velocities from these cartridges, and you should get pretty gosh darn decent performance. But if your setup, like I said, is shorter, you might want to stay away from these. These are accurate enough within the distances that most things would be taking place at, so I wouldn't really worry about the accuracy all that much. As a matter of fact, these right here tend to be more accurate than what most people are able of shooting anyway, not unless you're at some kind of bench-rested position. So, in conclusion to the video, if you have yourself proper setups, then this right here can absolutely be proper, really good ammunition for your purposes. It's cheap and abundant. I know my 77 grain stuff, that stuff tends to lean more towards like $1 a round. I could literally stockpile like double the amount of this green tip 5.56 stuff in comparison to that 77 grain stuff. So with it being cheap and available and effective from long barrels, and most people rocking 16-inch AR barrels in most engagements not being beyond 300 yards, I would say if you want to stockpile this stuff for an SHTF situation, absolutely go for it. Of course, your situation, your setup, your mileage may vary, etc., etc. Maybe an AR platform in general is just not going to be good for you. If you are in, I don't know, the plains of the Midwest, I use that area a lot because there's huge, huge plains there, and you could like be shot at from a mile away. Maybe a shorty AR platform in 5.56 with this green tip ammo would not be ideal for you if you're getting shot at from a mile away. But even in an SHTF without rule of law sort of situation, I don't foresee somebody shooting at somebody else from a mile away. If they do, they're not going to make it very long through that SHTF situation. So that's just my 2 cents on these rounds. They're great for what you pay for, assuming that you have the proper setup to be able to run them, and you're in a situation where you won't really have to touch out beyond 300 yards, which is the case for most people. They're accurate enough for most people because most people aren't going to be accurate enough to be able to effectively utilize or notice the loss of accuracy with these rounds anyway. So that's my 2 cents on the subject. I'm going to go ahead and end this video now. Thanks for watching, folks. I appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below has a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see y'all in the next episode.
Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. The poor man's Garrett. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.